name is Envelope Wong. I'm 31 years old this year and I'm an ant keeper. This is 5 questions. So what got you into ant keeping? I would say I am in love with nature since I'm young. So naturally, I'm really interested in getting to know animals a little bit better, including the critters. So one day, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, somewhere downstairs my house, I found a queen ant. That's where I got really interested in ant keeping. I started researching on it and I realized they were very interesting creatures and they play a very significant role in the ecosystem. I started without much introduction from anyone else. Of course, then when you started researching on it, then you realize there's YouTube channels that talk about ant keeping and stuff. Then I realized I wasn't alone. How do you start an ant colony? So to start an ant colony, first you need a queen ant that's fertile. So you start by finding a queen ant, you keep it in a test tube most of the time, and then you wait for it a couple of months to make sure that they have their nymatics. That's their first few workers that come out. So after that stage, that's where you usually have to feed those that is not fully claustral. Then you start feeding and then you make sure that they slowly have more and more workers. And what kind of food do they really eat? I would say the food ranges a lot depending on what kind of species you're talking about. So trapjaw, for example, usually thrive with high protein food. So in the wild, they'll usually catch smaller insects. That's why you usually feed them. Then of course, you're talking about the ants that you usually find in your household. Those like black crazy ants and such. They eat all kinds of stuff, from your donut all the way to the sugar that you leave behind, to the cereal that you drop on the floor. So those are the kind of food that you can feed them. How do you catch a queen ant? If you guys ever notice, like sometimes after raining season or after it rains, you'll see insects that's flying around. So most of these insects are usually queen alates and drones. So how do you identify them? They are mostly very similar looking to the normal ants that you see outside, just that they have a larger thorax, they have a larger abdomen, then they have wings with them. Usually if I would want to find queen ants, I'll go to the park, because that's where you can find a lot more interesting species that's around. So how do you usually catch them? I usually lead them into the test tube that I've already set up to actually lure them in, just by slowly moving them or just covering them for a while and then trying to slightly push them into the into the container itself or the test tube itself. What do you do with them? What do I do with them? I would say I always observe the ants on a regular basis. So I'll spend hours just looking at them forage, look for their food, tear out pieces of food that's given to them. When I look at them, how they take care of the brood, how they take care of the queen, how they clean up their environment, how they are organized in a manner whereby if someone were to find a food, one of the ant were to find a food, they will usually use pheromone to actually lead the rest of the ant colony to the food source. Then that's where they gather and harvest the food. And that's something that I find very interesting. So I would say they are very cooperative and they are all working together as a whole organism itself. Yeah. To give one distinctive favorite example is whereby I managed to raise Camponotus gigas, which is giant forest ant. So this is one of the largest ant species in the world. In Singapore, that's the largest ant species. So that's a very hard to come by species. And I managed to succeed in raising a founding colony to like around 40 workers. So to me, that's like the greatest accomplishment that I have so far. And I feel that through my experience of growing a colony, I managed to share with the peers that I have in the ant community so that many more after myself managed to have successful colonies from that giant forest ant that no one actually managed to really raise a huge colony before in Singapore. So what do your friends and family members think of your hobby? I would say initially when I started the hobby, most of my friends used to laugh at me, think that's very funny because most people would have regular pets like your cats and dogs, rabbits, hamster. But ant keeping is something that's very new back then. 4 or 5 years ago when I started, I think not a lot of people were into this hobby. So I would say initially I was laughed upon. Eventually when the colony that I had became larger and larger, and more people knew about it, especially the friends and family members that I have, they got very interested in the hobby because they realized that compared to the regular pets that people will usually have, ants doesn't take as much time and effort to grow a colony successfully. You don't need to clean their shit all the time. You don't need to regularly feed them. If you can set up an auto feeder, most of it is fine. Yeah, so I think it's a unique hobby, and most people are catching on it right now, especially due to COVID situation from staying home. This was 5 questions. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment below if you have further questions. Bye! Hello everyone, my name is Envelope Wong, and I'm 31 this year. I'm an ant keeper, and these are 5 questions.
And this is my question. No, this is the title of the case.
Okay, this is fine.
No, it's okay, just go ahead for the joke.
Okay. Hi, my name is Envelope Wong. I'm 31 years old this year, and I'm an ant keeper. I'm 31.